What is up, my friends? Welcome back into the podcast. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. Guys, today I'm going to be talking about Odell Beckham Jr. As many of you know, he was released by the Cleveland Browns, and he became a free agent and soon after signed with the Los Angeles Rams. Man, the Los Angeles Rams are absolutely loaded now. It's going to be fun to watch their offense this year. I am going to be talking about how this affects Odell Beckham Jr.'s fantasy outlook and how it affects the fantasy outlook of every other fantasy relevant player on the Los Angeles Rams, and I'm going to be giving you a breakdown of every single one of those players and how the Odell Beckham Jr. trade affects them specifically. And I'm going to get right into it, guys, but if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button below. And if you do enjoy my content today, make sure to give me a thumbs up, as likes help my channel tremendously. All right, guys, I'm going to start with Odell Beckham Jr. and the positive end of the argument. These people are saying that Odell Beckham Jr. is going to help the team significantly. He's going to propel them into winning a Super Bowl. And that from a fantasy outlook, he is going to be a wide receiver one once again and produce elite fantasy numbers and potentially be one of the best wide receivers in fantasy football. So I understand this side of the argument. I really do. I mean, look, he's got tremendous upside due to his talent, his run after the catch abilities, being on a very explosive offense, a far better offense that he's ever played for, having awesome touchdown upside due to being in this offense, and he's playing for, not only the best quarterback he's ever had in Matt Stafford, but the best offensive play caller he's ever had in Sean McVay. So all the boxes are checked for Odell Beckham Jr. to be an elite fantasy option, and anyone that tells you that Odell Beckham Jr. is washed is a complete idiot, guys. Look, Odell Beckham Jr. didn't have great numbers in Cleveland because of the circumstance. Your success for a wide receiver at the NFL level is just as much about circumstance as it is about talent, okay? Circumstance being like, what kind of offense is he in? Does he have a good quarterback? Is it a run-first offense? Is it a pass-first offense? Does the coach that's calling the plays for him know how to use him to get the best of his abilities displayed on the field? Is he in an offense that scores enough touchdowns to give him ample scoring opportunities? There's so many factors at play other than just a wide receiver's talent that determine his overall production as far as football and fantasy football numbers are concerned. So anybody that tells you that he's washed up is a complete idiot. The only reason that he didn't have great numbers in Cleveland is because it was a run-first team. They are built to run the football, not produce awesome fantasy numbers for their wide receivers. So really, he just wasn't a very good fit in Cleveland. So it's good for him overall that he is not on that team anymore and that he is now on a pass-first team. So due to that being the case, and due to him having tremendous scoring upside on the Rams, I think that Odell Beckham Jr. can definitely be a wide receiver one as far as fantasy football is concerned once again. And I'm very excited to see what he can do in this offense. Next side of the argument is that he's going to do just okay. I totally understand this side of the argument as well, guys, because as well as the Rams offense has been functioning, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, why would they change anything? They're featuring Cooper Kupp as their number one offensive weapon. They're doing it every week, giving him double-digit targets in every single game. He's going up and putting like Jerry Rice-like numbers, and it's very fun to watch. And it's one of those things where it's like, if it's working that well, why would they really change anything? They might just use Odell Beckham Jr. As kind of the guy that they give 4 or 5 targets a game, and every once in a while when they need a huge reception on like a 3rd and long or a scoring opportunity that's pivotal, they might use Odell Beckham Jr.'s they might use Odell Beckham Jr.'s ability to create matchup problems and exploit matchups to give him the ball in a high leverage situation, but not really give him wide receiver one target share. That's a definite possibility, and that's the argument that he's not going to be a wide receiver one because the targets just aren't going to be enough. But even with that argument, I think that even with minimal target share in this offense, his talent and overall abilities plus being in such an explosive offense, I think that he could produce wide receiver one numbers without even having wide receiver one target share, but we're going to see how that plays out. And there is the other side of the argument, which says that, Odell Beckham Jr. is a detriment to the team. He's cancer to the locker room. He ruins team chemistry. He's washed up. He cries because he doesn't get the ball enough. Guys, this is an absolute joke, okay? You want a receiver that is hungry to get the ball. I mean, do you want a wide receiver that doesn't want to be involved in the offense? The reason that he was crying that he wasn't getting the ball enough in Cleveland is because they weren't passing him the ball enough. It's not really Cleveland's fault because they're built on being a run-first team. But the fact of the matter is, Odell Beckham Jr. wanted to have the target share that he deserves based on his talents, and he just wasn't getting that. So naturally, he's going to start crying when he doesn't get the ball because he wants to be involved in the offense because he knows how freaking good he is. He knows that the coaches know how good he is. He just wasn't getting adequate target share. And then when he did get his opportunities, he was all in his own head, so he started dropping passes and performing poorly when he did get his opportunities because he was so upset about not being involved in the offense. and then it was just kind of a domino effect from there. But this does not reflect on Odell Beckham Jr.'s talent. He just wasn't the right fit in Cleveland. So he's not washed up. He's not cancer to a locker room. This is absolutely just stupid thinking, guys. Anybody who thinks that he is going to somehow make the Los Angeles Rams worse is an idiot. That is not going to happen. He's either going to make the team way better or the team's going to function at about the same level as far as their offensive efficiency. Okay, so that's the outlook on Odell Beckham Jr. going forward. Moving on to his teammates, the first player I want to talk about is Cooper Kupp. Okay, I really don't think that this is going to negatively affect Cooper Kupp. Okay, they are set on getting Cooper Kupp his 10 targets a game and featuring him as their main offensive weapon. I don't think this is going to change anytime soon because they've been putting up crazy points all season long, and Cooper Kupp has been pretty much unstoppable. He's the best weapon in fantasy football right now, and why would they stop passing him the ball like crazy if it works every single week and teams haven't had an answer for it? And on top of that, now that teams have to worry about Odell Beckham Jr. and him, torching you, Cooper Kupp might even be better, as crazy as that sounds, because teams can't focus all their attention on stopping Cooper Kupp. So I think that Cooper Kupp is still going to be an elite fantasy option. Will his numbers go down in the second half of the season? Definitely possible, but that was possible before Odell Beckham Jr. joined the team, just because his numbers in the first half of the season were so freakishly good that they almost have to go down a little bit because he's just been so unbelievable. But we're going to see how it plays out. I don't think that Cooper Kupp's target share is going to be affected. I don't think that Cooper Kupp's overall fantasy output is going to be affected. So he is going to be just fine. Moving on to Robert Woods, a little bit of a different scenario with Robert Woods. I think that Odell Beckham Jr. is definitely going to cut into Robert Woods' target share. If the Rams know what's good for them, they are going to use Odell Beckham Jr. as their second target wide receiver. Obviously, Cooper Kupp's still going to dominate the team in targets, but as far as target share is concerned, I really think that there's a possibility that as the season goes along, Odell Beckham really starts to become the second most used wide receiver on the team, and that means that he would be significantly cutting into Robert Woods' target share. And considering the fact that Robert Woods has already been pretty disappointing so far to fantasy owners, I think it's going to be even worse in the second half of the season now that Odell Beckham Jr. is on the team. And the Rams are probably going to focus on getting the ball to Odell Beckham Jr. more than they are to Robert Woods, because at the end of the day, Odell Beckham Jr. is just a better wide receiver. No offense to Robert Woods. He's very reliable. He's actually a stud wide receiver himself, but he is the third best wide receiver on the team. So Odell Beckham Jr. might cut into his opportunity share significantly. We're going to see how it plays out, but I do not like the second half for Robert Woods. I think that owners need to start looking for another wide receiver to put in his spot, but definitely stash him on your bench and just see how it plays out. Okay, next on the list, we got to talk about Darrel Henderson Jr. Darrel Henderson Jr. is not a yardage-dependent running back. He's been dominating from fantasy perspective all year because he's falling into the end zone like crazy due to being on such a high-scoring offense. Now that Odell Beckham Jr. is on the team, the offense might be even better, so that creates even more scoring opportunities for Darrel Henderson Jr., even if he carries the ball a little bit less due to the Rams passing more now that they have Odell Beckham. I think that his scoring opportunities will more than make up for that, and he's going to continue to fall into the end zone week after week, probably for the rest of the entire season, because that's just what Darrel Henderson does. He's the product of being on an elite offense, and he gets in the end zone like crazy. I don't see that changing because of Odell Beckham Jr. Next on my list, I got to talk about Tyler Higbee. Guys, Tyler Higbee is a tight end, and they're going to have to pass their tight ends at some point, right? All your passing plays can't go to your wide receivers. A certain percentage of the target share still has to go to the tight ends. And so even though Odell Beckham Jr. is on the team, I really don't think that he's going to cut into Tyler Higbee's workload whatsoever. I think that Tyler Higbee will still see about the same amount of targets and will still be a pretty darn good fantasy option at the tight end position. And then I obviously have to talk about Matt Stafford, guys. Matt Stafford has been a pretty darn good fantasy quarterback in most weeks this year. I just don't see how there's any way that Odell Beckham Jr. doesn't make him even better. He has another option in the receiving game, and he has an elite option in the receiving game. So I don't see how Matt Stafford's numbers wouldn't get better. Worst case scenario, they'll stay about the same, but they're either going to stay the same or get better due to Odell Beckham Jr. most likely. Okay, guys, that pretty much covers it. That's the fantasy outlook for Odell Beckham Jr. and for all of his teammates and how that affects them from a fantasy perspective. I hope this video helped, guys. I do appreciate you tuning into the video today, guys, and I will catch y'all later.